morning. Thanks everyone for coming out today on a rainy morning. I'd like to thank Dr. Stork, Shannon Hill, and her team at the Foundation for including me here today to talk about Quest to Promise. Thanks to our panelists as well for joining this important conversation today. My name is James Schulke, and I'm the Director of Advocacy and Engagement for the College Promise campaign. We advocate for programs like Quest to Promise around the country. My parents met at Cal Poly in 1976, and their first date was a hike to the letter P up on the hill, and nobody ever knows what that means, so I wanted to say it here today. Years later, I enrolled at Cuesta College in 2005. This quickly became a very special place for me. I love Cuesta, and I can't tell you how happy I am to be back. There were two things in particular, looking back, that really stood out. Excuse me. The diversity of the student body here. This is the only place where I ever sat next to veterans and immigrants, middle-aged students, and that made a big difference in the classroom discussion. I remember I was in a philosophy class, and philosophy can get a little dark sometimes, and we were talking about death one day. And there was an 18-year-old in the class who said, "Oh, I could die tomorrow, I'd be fine. You know, I've lived life to its fullest. I'm great. I'm good to go. It doesn't, you know, I'm happy." And the professor didn't quite know how to handle that, was going to move on. And then I heard a slight chuckle from the back of the classroom. And I turned around, and there was this 60-year-old man saying, and he said, "I'm sorry, you seem like a nice kid, but I just don't think you know what you're talking about." And that just enriched the conversation so much, because otherwise we were just a bunch of young people who were going to move on. And that diversity was so special and led to a lot of conversations in the classroom that I remember all these years later. I do not remember conversations in classrooms at other schools I went to. The other thing that I loved about Cuesta were the faculty. They were the best I had at any place. I always had their attention and time, whether it was Jim West in the English department or Victor Krulakowski in the poli-sci department. I loved those guys. So a very special place here at Cuesta. I ended up going on to UC Davis and working on President Obama's first presidential campaign. By some fluke of circumstances, I was fortunate enough to end up working for his White House, and I worked in the government affairs shop there. And I met a lot of governors who would say that they missed being mayor, or they missed being a city council member, or a legislator. And I said, "What? Seems like governor's a good gig." And they'd say, "Well, no, I really miss making an impact at the community level. I miss the bipartisan commitment that people have to changing their communities, and I wish I could dive into that again." And so I heard this enough that I took note, and I started to think of my own career, and I started to think, who are the people, and what are the institutions that I've come across in my own life that are making that kind of impact at the local level? And the first thing I thought of was Cuesta College here. So I left the White House with the hope of working in the community college space. I attended Brown University for graduate school and often told my peers there that I would much rather be sitting in a community college classroom. Having attended a community college, UC, and private university, I can tell you I prefer them in the reverse order. Yeah. So eventually I became involved in the College Promise campaign, and that's only because of my experience here at Cuesta. That's why I work at this nonprofit, is because of this campus and the people in it. The College Promise campaign is a 501c3 nonprofit. As I mentioned, we advocate for College Promise programs which deliver debt-free tuition and fees to students. We are chaired by Dr. Jill Biden, a community college professor, and Republican Governor Jim Geringer of Wyoming. Our executive director is Martha Cantor, who has deep ties in this state. And there are now nearly 200 of these Promise programs across the country in 40 states. They're all a bit different from each other. They have various designs and funding mechanisms, but they all share the goal of broadening access to education and encouraging degree completion. There are dozens of new programs in California alone, and that's in large part because of the great leadership this state enjoys. Whether it's Chancellor Eloy Oakley, who's now at the top of the community college system, who led the Long Beach College Promise successfully, or Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom, Mayor Eric Garcetti, Senator Kamala Harris, and countless other chancellors and presidents, foundation heads, and community leaders all supporting this progress. Of course, the momentum continues in places like Cuesta, where folks are ready to double down on success. So we'll turn to that conversation now, the Cuesta Promise. I'd like to start by briefly introducing our panelists, and then I'll pose a few questions for them, and we'll have time for audience Q&A as well. You all have cards in front of you where you can write down any questions you may have, and we'll collect those towards the end of the panel. First, on my right, we have Dr. Gil Stork. Dr. Stork is a Cal Poly graduate. He was appointed president here in 2012 after serving in the interim role. His career at Cuesta goes back to 1967. 50 years. 50 years. That's pretty great. He joined as a faculty member here. I'll let him share that story with you later. But what I really appreciate about Dr. Stork is that he came out of retirement to continue contributing to Cuesta and serving the San Luis Obispo community. I think that's tremendous. We're grateful for his leadership here at the college and on Cuesta Promise especially. Next we have Bill Swanson. Bill is a proud Cuesta and Cal Poly alumni, a real success story here in San Luis Obispo, having gone on to serve as chairman and CEO of Raytheon Company from 2004 to 2014. Bill joined Raytheon in 1972, holding a wide range of leadership positions across the company and throughout his career. But Bill remembers where he came from and the institutions that served him along the way. He's served on the Cal Poly Foundation Board of Directors. He's a member of the Cal Poly President's Cabinet, sits on the University of Massachusetts President's Advisory Council, and of course he is here at Cuesta to help us today understand why Promise programs are an investment in the communities they serve. I've gotten to know Bill through his role on the College Promise Campaign's National Advisory Board, where we're grateful to have his business acumen and passion for community colleges. As soon as I learned he and I both went to Cuesta, I reached out, and I've always been grateful that we've had a board member who shares my passion for this campus. And next, moving down the line, we have Dr. Vicki Schumacher, who serves as the superintendent of the Coast Unified School District, a district that I believe is 60% Latino. And she is not a Cal Poly graduate, but neither am I, so we won't hold that against her. She is a graduate of the prestigious Berkeley and UCLA campuses, and she also speaks French and plays the piano, so she definitely outclasses me. Okay. Throughout her academic career, Dr. Schumacher has studied the arts, math, and literacy. She promotes this type of rounded education among students in Coast Unified, and that sounds like a pretty good idea. We appreciate your partnership on Cambria Promise, and appreciate you joining us today. And last but not least, we have Addie Brown. Addie is the reason we're here today. She is a hardworking student whose future is bright because of her own resolve and because of the investment Cuesta Promise made in her. She is a San Luis Obispo native, a graduate of Templeton High. Addie is a Cuesta Promise Scholarship recipient, and she will be graduating from Cuesta this year with an associate's degree in accounting, of business administration, economics, legal studies, and liberal arts. Wow. We won't compare her academic record at Cuesta to my own today. But we'll ask her a bit later about her plans for the future. Addie is also a student ambassador and currently works at Zested Up and Farmstead Catering, which all just goes to prove what we all know, which is that community college students are the hardest working students out there. Thank you, Addie, for your participation today. We're really inspired by all your success and look forward to learning more about your participation in this program. So, with the introductions out of the way, we'll jump into a few questions. We're again here to celebrate the success of Cuesta Promise, examine what type of program this is, how it is an investment in the community, and we want to look at the future of the program here in San Luis Obispo County and maybe similar programs across the country. So now that I've shared some background on each of you as well as my own Cuesta story, please share with us your own Cuesta stories. What are your ties to this community? We'll start with Dr. Stork.
Well, I needed a job. And actually, I was teaching and coaching at San Luis Obispo High School, teaching math and coaching football. And this is now 1964. Yeah, I just started my career teaching after graduating from Cal Poly and earning my teaching credential. And I went into teaching because I was really good at math and I wanted to stay involved in athletics, and so teaching seemed to be a good way that I could combine those two interests and skills. So while I was teaching at San Luis Obispo High School, Cuesta College opened. The first year of full operation was 1965, and along came some new faculty into the area who were football coaches, and they happened to live in the same apartment complex that we were living in. So we had an instant connection through sports, and in 1965, or 1967, one of them became the new head football coach and said, "Why don't you come out to Cuesta College and join us?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? You're out there in the barracks," and which Bill remembers very well, the barracks and the mud and the cows and so on. I said, "Why would I do that?" Kind of the same question I asked, why would I come back and be president, you know? Not very smart, but, and suddenly I found myself on the faculty at Cuesta College in 1967, coaching football, and I had a minor in PE, so I was teaching the physical education division and picking up a math class here or there. But not at 25 years old, I had no clue what I was doing and what opportunities and what horizons were going to open for me to be able to stay in my hometown and have an entire career, having the opportunity to impact the lives of hundreds and thousands of students. And that's why I'm so excited that Bill's here today, because, you know, we started at Cuesta the same year, in different roles. But anyway, that's how I got to Cuesta. And didn't leave. Yeah.
Okay. Great. We've got another inspiring Cuesta story from Bill. See if your mic.
Can you hear me okay if I talk without a mic? Okay, let me project my voice then. I went to Morro Bay High School, met my wife of almost 49 years now there. The golf coach here at Cuesta offered me a scholarship, and that's how I ended up here. Thought I'd do pre-med. The biology class taught me that I didn't like cutting things up. So I immediately switched to business or accounting. Didn't like the rules, and Cuesta at the time had counselors, and I met a great one who decided that I had an aptitude for engineering, mechanical, and industrial, and convinced me to get my AS. And the golf coach at Cal Poly proceeded to give me a scholarship, so I'm happy to say I attended college for 5 years. It cost me about $50 for books and supplies, but my education was free. And one thing that I always remember is what we have today is really a product of my family, faith, and my education. And so for me, giving back to education has always been a paramount, because don't know what I would have had without my education. And I think community colleges provide the spark that some students need to get started. And once that flame gets going, there's no stopping you and what you do. And as James pointed out, I truly believe community colleges have a different DNA in how they do things. It wasn't given to them. They have to work at it, and they know how to participate in a team environment. They're not individuals, generally not superstars, until that spark gets lit, and then you can't stop them. And so for somebody that at one point had 70,000 people working for them, I always found that if we could get the right community college student, get them in and get them started, we provided the balance of the education at our cost, then we had someone that would be with our team, in my case, 42 years later. And that's important because one of the things you worry about when you run a corporation is your intellectual property goes home every night at 5 o'clock. And you want them back there the next day at 8 in the morning. So to me, community colleges are a great investment in our country's future. It's a way of helping with the wage gap that people try and solve in other ways, but an education is the best way, because I can truly say we didn't have two nickels to rub together when we were first married. And what we have today, I thank Gil, I thank Cuesta College, and I thank Cal Poly for that, because it played a key part in our lives.
Dr. Schumacher, talk about your interest here in Cuesta and your work in public education in San Luis Obispo County.
Good morning. I wanted to share with you that I began as superintendent 3 years ago, so not quite the long tenure that my co-panel members have had, but I have really enjoyed all of the partnerships that our district has been able to build with Cuesta College. I know that when I first came here, I met Dr. Stork. We've been participating in many meetings. I've had an opportunity to work a little bit with the Higher Education Committee for the League of Women Voters for San Luis Obispo, and I've enjoyed attending a number of the performances with the Cuesta Cultural and Performing Arts Center and wind instruments and the various choirs and such. But I think for me, the great passion is the hope that Cuesta College gives to building a highly skilled workforce. We're working really hard in our district with Cuesta College. We have partnerships, for example, in the area of math and science. We have 2 different Cuesta professors who come regularly and coach our teachers at the high school level, and this is helping a great deal for our students to have familiarity with these professors. And we also work with Cuesta College in terms of dual credit. We offer a semester-long course called Get Focused, Stay Focused to all freshmen, and then we also offer a 1-year dual credit engineering course to our students. And so this is more than just them coming to visit Cuesta and learning about registration, but really becoming college ready, and the stepping from being a high school graduate onto the Cuesta campus is not so daunting, something that they're more comfortable taking that step. So we're really proud of what we're doing in our district to support our students coming to Cuesta.
Great. Addie, you've got a great Cuesta story. Share it with us.
Well, I'm a 4th generation local to the North County area, and I just feel so lucky that I got to grow up in this area and attend school in such a beautiful place. And the Promise Scholarship was what originally made me decide to attend Cuesta. And now that I've been here, I have just gained so much knowledge and life skills that have transformed my life. And I have goals and a education and career path that didn't exist before I attended Cuesta. And I've also learned important life skills that are at Cuesta that will help me achieve these goals, and I'm forever grateful for that. And the personal connections at Cuesta is a really tight-knit campus, and I've just met so many amazing people and professors, and so happy to be here.
Great. You said you came to Cuesta because of the Promise program.
That's correct, yes.
Wow, that's great. Dr. Stork, Cuesta Promise launched here in 2013. Maybe tell us a bit about how this idea first came about. Why was this an investment Cuesta College believed in?
Well, actually, in March of 2010, right after I came back in as the interim president, I was visiting Ventura College on an accreditation visit, and I noticed in their self-study this reference to the Ventura Promise. So when I had an opportunity to interview the president of the college, I was curious about that, because the description of it was a program that was available to only those high school graduates from Ventura County. And so I thought, wow, what a wonderful gift to locals. And I was thinking back to our situation where during the 90s and into the early 2000s, we were taking some pretty good hits from community members in San Luis Obispo about the number of out-of-area students who were coming to Cuesta. And therefore, living in apartments, neighborhoods, and so on, along with all the Cal Poly students. And so we were starting to be part of that mix of saying, why are we got all these out-of-area kids who are impacting our neighborhoods? And I was thinking, what a nice thing to give back to the community is only those that are eligible that live here and graduate here. I found out that they funded their program through a flea market that they've been holding on their campus forever, every weekend. So it was a pay-as-you-go kind of program. So as long as they were raising money, they were able to do it. In some down years, they had to cut back, and it was a first-come, first-served kind of a program. And so I walked away with that idea saying, what a wonderful thing. All we need is money. And after I hired Shannon Hill as our executive director in 2011, she came in and we were talking. I said, Shannon, what I'd really love to do someday is do a Promise program. But I'd like it to be funded differently because I don't want to make it on again, off again kind of an experience. And so a year or two later, she walked in and said, I think we can deliver the Promise. And after I got up off the floor, I said, how are we going to do that? Well, then we were informed from a local attorney in Morro Bay, who was a co-trustee of an estate, said, the DeVica family in Morro Bay has left Cuesta College 2/3 of their estate. And so that's great. How much is that? $8 million. And I said, oh, that's really good. So we took this proposal to the foundation board of directors and requested that we quasi-endow the money. So then we would then work off the interest of that endowment, which means then that money was available in perpetuity. So it was an investment of that $8 million that was going to pay dividends over and over and over again. And so then we put together a massive task force because we needed to figure out how we were going to deliver this. And I remember sitting in a room and we had whiteboards and we had charts saying, what would we do, who would be eligible, etc. And there were also lots of needs to serve when we were looking at it. How do we control the numbers? So we started with first-time freshmen right out of high school. Once they graduate, we figured we need to open it up to not only public but private and homeschoolers, so we don't leave anybody out, and some GED completers, because we wanted this to be an access solution, not a restrictive or an elite. We didn't put any entrance requirements. They didn't have to have any certain GPA or number of units completed. All we wanted was a desire to do something significant in their life, like Addie was talking about, having a leg up. We were really looking at first generation. We were looking at underrepresented students, creating that open door that maybe they or their families never thought was possible for them at college. Because there is that impression that, well, I can't go to college because I know it's too much money, without even knowing how much it costs. And so we wanted to break down that barrier. But then questions came up, well, what about that student who does a gap year, or does a church mission for 2 years, or goes into service and then comes back as a first-time local high school graduate? What about their needs? And so they were up on the board. What about books? What about transportation? So those are all high needs. The problem with every one of those other categories is we had no control over when those students were going to come back or enter, and we had no way to assure that we would have the resources to be able to serve all of those students at the same time. So we limited it, first of all, to a semester. So when we launched the Promise in the fall of 2014, it was for one semester only. because we didn't really know what it was going to cost at that point, how many subscribers we were going to get, and so on. And we had about 640 some students come in on the Promise out of the almost 800 students that first year. Once we ran the numbers, we found out that about 60% of those students qualified for the state grant called the Board of Governors fee waiver. So that meant all of their course fees were already paid for under that grant. And so the Promise then was used to pick up those fees, like the health fee, student body fee, the student center fee, so that when all the smoke cleared, everybody looked the same. So the Promise is a last dollar kind of program. We kick in the financial aid first, and then we fill in the gap. When we ran the numbers, we found out with that number that already qualified for the Board of Governors fee waiver, we had enough money to do a whole year. So then we informed those students that, no, you've got a whole year now, a waiver. And then we started our marketing for the second wave of the Promise and build off of that. So that's how it was launched. We still have that parking lot with ideas about what we'd love to do. And someday we may find others. We've talked about maybe if we have enough resources, we could do a book voucher rather than pay for all the books, because that's such a huge variable now in today's, that's one of the bigger costs right now is the classroom, those materials. But we pay for course fees now. So if you're taking a welding class and you've got to buy welding rods or whatever, the Promise will pick up that cost. But anyway, that was the launch. The difference of our program with the several others that I know, some are restrictive. The Long Beach program, you come in a cohort that meets certain requirements and have certain destination, but they have a nice clean pass through the Long Beach State College, the CSU Long Beach, which we haven't been able to develop with Cal Poly because of their impacted nature. Not that it can't be done, it just hasn't been done yet. And others are like Santa Barbara's that is just launching one. It's a pay-as-you-go. So they're trying to stay 2 or 3 years ahead. So it's a continual fundraising. I believe the best solution is really an endowed program. And then you work on people to contribute to the endowment, and that keeps growing. But that way we have an assurance that when an Addie graduates from high school, she knows that we have the resources waiting for her to fund a year, and then hopefully we'll be able to expand it to a second year. So that was the beginning. Just by chance, walking on the Benjamin campus.
Dr. Schumacher, the Cambria Second Year Promise launched not long ago. What has this program meant for your students? I understand maybe you have a letter from one of them as well.
Yes, our efforts for seeking donations from our community have been led by a couple of people who have joined us in the audience. I wanted to introduce Dr. Julian Crocker. He's retired county superintendent for San Luis Obispo County, and he is a resident of Cambria and has been quite involved in helping us to seek donations. Partnered with Cheryl C., she's in the back there, and she serves as a counselor at Coast Union High School. And so our efforts to raise funds have come on the heels of how excited our community is about the Quest to Promise. And we have students where it's really perhaps unattainable to move forward with the second year without support. So it has started with one donor who's anonymous, who came forward to fund perhaps 2 or 3 years of the Cambria Promise, and we're making efforts now for sustainability. But I want to read this letter from one of the students who was so pleased to hear at graduation that even though he's not in the class of 16, he was from the class of 15, that his second year of college would be paid for. And this is Tommy to the donor. I am a student at Cuesta College, and I am beyond excited and grateful of the news of the Cambria Promise. Not having to pay another year of tuition is truly a blessing, and it is so refreshing to know there is a person as generous as you out there. I am so thankful and so honored to be a Coast Union graduate and alum. Thank you so much for helping me further achieve my college aspirations.
That's great. Dr. Stork, I don't want to get too far along without talking about the future of Quest to Promise. You've talked a bit about how this program was formed, but I believe you've all been making an announcement here recently regarding the expansion and sustainability of Quest for Promise. Could you maybe outline the plans for the future and why is it important for a second year to be included here?
Well, one of the things I noticed, we've been watching a couple of things. One is we're looking at the number of students, local high school students, who are choosing to come to Questa. Since we've initiated the Promise, we've gone from about just under a 30% what we call capture rate. We don't really capture them, but they choose to come to Questa right out of high school. We were running about a 30% capture rate of local high school students, and since we've initiated the Promise program, we have the most students ever, local students coming to Questa College, even in the glory years before 2009. So we have over 1,000 local high school students coming now, and so we're up to about 36% capture rate. I would like to see that up to 50% in the next 2 years. And I think that what's fueling that is that first year Promise program. Now, having said that, one of the things I'm also looking at is what happens to those students when they come here. What is their persistence rate from fall to spring? And then what is their persistence rate into the second year? Now, what we found, and we were comparing that to a pre-Promise fall of 13 high school entrance, first-time freshmen coming into high school, or coming into Questa College. And the persistence rate from fall to spring of that pre-group was around 67%, and now it's about 70%. So I know that students can stay in longer. The other part is that our students are taking more units. Before they were taking an average of about 8 units, now they're taking 9, and they're completing, they're attempting more units, and they're completing more units, and they're also performing at equal to or greater than GPA. The problem I'm seeing right now is the retention from the first year to the second year. And that's where we see no gain at all. So I see that the same level, it's about 67% of the students who start in one fall. There's only about 67, about 2 out of 3 that are still there the second year. And that hasn't changed very much. And I really attribute some of that to the fact that the cost and being able to stay in school and being able to afford to be there and not get themselves into debt. So I really believe that being able to extend, we're going to be looking at the Coast Union students to see what their persistence and their retention level and performance is by having that funded second year. It's a small cohort, maybe 15 students, I believe.
I'm doing some math here.
Okay.
I can tell you our preliminary data.
Okay.
So for the class of 14, which did not have an opportunity to participate in the Cambria Promise, we had a 29% capture rate from the first year to the second year. For our second class, which would be the class of 2015, which has had this opportunity, I've yet to do the math, maybe we can do some mental math, but we had 21 students enter as freshmen, and going into their sophomore year, we had 15, so well above 50% capture rate, yeah.
So that's the motivation. And I have to think back to when I started here and when Bill and Cheryl were students, there were no fees. You know, and for California Community Colleges, it was a free ride. We didn't get into unit fees until into the 70s, and after Prop 13 passed, that suddenly there were fees creeping into it. So what a gift of California to our population, and we need to get back to that. And we depend on the population of San Luis County to support the college and all of our needs, evidenced by our Measure L, the successful bond passage. And this is a way that we can give back to the residents of San Luis Obispo County. The other thing that, and I know one of the questions that you're probably going to ask later on is about the broader impact. And what I'm finding now is, in talking to Vicki and her colleagues, the other county superintendents, and also talking to the chamber executives, having a Promise program at Cuesta College is becoming an important recruiting tool for teachers and for other workers coming into our county when they're being faced with higher cost of living than in some other areas, to see that if they have a program, an opportunity for their children to attend college under the Promise, that's a huge savings to that family, and therefore an attractive option to taking a job here within San Luis County. I hadn't really thought about that in the beginning stage of this, but now I'm starting to see that it has some tentacles that can have some broader economic, in terms of our workforce and economic development.
Great. Bill, you've had a long career as a prominent business executive. Talk about that perspective. What about your experience at Raytheon convinces you that Promise programs like the one here at Cuesta is an investment?
Yeah, it's really important to a corporation. You take a company like Raytheon, where about 2/3 of them are engineers. One of the things that's really important is, do new employees or teammates have the ability to be able to use keyboard skills? Can they write? Can they read? Can they conceptually put thoughts together in a way to organize? And then they have to work in a team environment. And all of that requires some additional learning other than high school. If you look at current statistics, they're about a year old, but about 40% of all the jobs that are open require education beyond high school. I think that number is over 50 now, and it's growing. I should have mentioned when Professor Stork talked about welding, but I want to go back that when I mentioned Cheryl got the B, well, there was only one A in the class. It happened to be a physical ed class, and it was golf. He graded on the curve. I was on the golf team. Guess who got the A? And so I forgot that part of the story, that I was probably the only happy person in that class. But anyway, getting back to mention welding. I once went back a few years ago and looked at what it took to become a welder. When I graduated from Cal Poly, one of the things you had to take was a lot of welding, gas and arc and TIG and so forth. And I looked at the incoming requirements about 30 years ago for a welder. It was almost nothing. A little bit of geometry, not much about metals or anything. You try and get a job today as a welder, you better understand geometry, you better understand chemistry, you better understand coefficient expansion of metals and dissimilar metals. It's different. And that's because there's so much information out there. The jobs require skill levels at everything from business to engineering. And one thing I want to add is that for any business leaders in the room, we sometimes complain about the educational system. That's okay, but if you want to do something, I always tell my compatriots, it's time to get on the field. Get engaged, get part of the school board, become a trustee, understand some of the problems so you can help with the solutions. And about 3 years ago, there's 16 of the largest CEOs in Boston or Massachusetts. We formed a 501c. Our responsibility was to create jobs in Massachusetts. We had just come out of the recession. People were thinking of raising taxes, and our answer was, if you had more jobs and more people coming in, you'd generate revenue without taxation. And so we put together a transportation committee, education committee. We worked with the government on how to work on pension costs and benefit costs. We worked on trade. And so those were some of our initiatives. We created a digital healthcare initiative in the state. Now it's one of the top in the country. But I was the education committee chair, and we saw a deterioration in the inner city of Boston. And so as a group, we created a program called Learn and Earn from our community colleges. There's 22 in Massachusetts. The credits are non-transferable. think about that. I could mention other issues, and we went about and changed the entire system. We put members of our companies on the boards of local community colleges, and we created a system with Bunker Hill, which is an inner city community college. The Learn and Earn program was we paid for transportation, we paid $15 an hour, and we gave community college students a job. And one of the things we found immediately was there was a workforce alignment taking place, that students found they weren't taking the right courses. They needed to change what they were doing. Bunker Hill responded by changing part of the curriculum to match what EMC, Suffolk, State Street, Liberty Mutual, I could go on with the Fidelity, Raytheon, to match that. We started small, 25 students. Program now is 400. 80% of it is diverse, and we are giving first-time attendees to community college a way to have a job and go to school at the same time. I find that co-op community college students are unbelievable. They just need a little of the spark, and they need business to help. And we're going to now expand that program across the state to other community colleges because they see the benefit of it. So part of it is business has to get engaged. We have to bring our needs to community colleges, and once you get that matching impedance, as I put it, then there's no stopping.
Addie, the most important people in Quest of Promise are the hardworking students the program serves. What has your experience been like financially, personally? What has that process been like for you and your family?
I would be in a completely different situation if I hadn't chose to attend Cuesta or if I hadn't received the Promise Scholarship. When I was in high school, my goal was to apply to a four-year university, and I was gonna, go to college straight out of high school to a four-year university. And so I sent out the applications and started getting acceptance letters, and that's the really exciting part, is applying. And you don't necessarily think about, when you're in that process, how are you gonna pay for it? And so I got the letters and I started doing research on how much it was going to cost. And I quickly realized that my parents weren't going to be able to pay tens of thousands of dollars per year for me to go to school. And so my only option would have been taking out a ton of student loans. And I had applied to all those schools as a psychology major. And I was interested in it and I liked it, but a part of me knew that I wasn't 100% sure I was going to stick with that through my college career. And so it was too risky for me. I thought, I just can't bet on that. And so when I heard about the Quest of Promise, it logically and financially for my family, it really just made the most sense. And the fact that I could also live at home while going to Cuesta, that savings and the fact that I've been working while going to school, now when I go to transfer to a four-year university this fall, I should be able to graduate with that degree with little to no student loans or debt. And that is just a huge advantage that I and my family are so grateful for, and that's because of the Quest of Promise that I was able to do that. So.
Great. Now, for Dr. Schumacher and the rest of you, if you'd like to chime in, how does Promise, how will it change the college-going culture in the Coast Unified District, but also throughout the rest of the county? How are students talking about Promise? I guess we got a bit of that from Addie. How do you think this program will affect that college-going culture on your high school campus?
Our students are really excited about the opportunity, and not only to move forward with Cuesta after their graduation from high school, but also Cuesta continues to partner with us to add more courses for dual credit. So next year, beyond the 2 courses I already mentioned, we're also going to be having, we have 2 pathways in our district, and one of the pathways is in the area of agriculture, but in particular in the area of arts, multimedia, and entertainment, our students are starting next year able to take all of those courses for dual credit. So they'll come equipped with many credits, and the momentum will be built, and that's part of what is also so encouraging to our students to move forward with Cuesta.
Great. Now, Bill, you touched on the recession, and there's still a lot of economic uncertainty in the country. How can these programs help offset inequities and help the U.S. Compete in a rapidly changing global economy?
The real difference today is, if I think back to the Quonset huts and the wooden sidewalks that we ventured when we went to school here, we did not operate in a global economy. Pretty much made in USA was made in USA. Made in China was something you knew wasn't going to last or going to work. Especially transistor radios back when that would break every time you turned them on. Whereas today, the company I ran, we did business in 82 countries around the world. It was a global competitive environment. The international game has really changed it. Education is different in other countries. Our company, 60% of our corporate giving went to education. I convinced our board that it was important because if you're a technical company, you need to make sure that there's resources coming in to do the job. If you don't have engineers, your growth is limited in your company. And we suffered from STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math was on the decline. And we felt we needed to work at middle school to make that happen. I'm also a proponent of adding the letter A into STEM so it becomes STEAM. I think engineers need a little bit of the arts. I always say engineers are romantics. People laugh at me when I say that, but we look at symmetry and design, the symmetry of form, fit, and function as we do things. And it helps make you a better leader. If you have that, you become too technical, in my opinion, and everything doesn't always work on logic. So from my standpoint, we have to realize that we are in a global environment, and we'll get our lunch eaten if we don't have the talent in this country to be able to do things. As I mentioned, we studied it around the world. Singapore is unbelievable. If you look at their education system and what they believe, the parents in Singapore are wired differently. They realize they can't teach their children science and math or technology or the advanced subjects, and they tutor to a percentage that you won't believe. We also studied the UK and Finland, for example, is another country that does it well. Here in the United States, parents are of the misconception that they can teach their children at times, and they can't. And so we've got to change this around a little bit. I'm always amazed when I used to travel in Asia and Europe, the engineering degree would be on the business card. Here, most people think engineers are on trains or doing sanitation work or something. So we've got to change that in a way. And to me, the reason I'm involved in the College Promise program is that it's about $38,000 now to go to community college, if you look around the country. Total debt, what you into. You mentioned student loans. That's a heck of a burden to leave with. And, you know, I can't thank Gil enough for what he's doing here and the fact that he'd like to make it 2 years. I think that's a difference. I think if we can do that in the country, that it'll help us compete globally. And we've got to realize that the world doesn't rotate around our small area. It is a global world. And this country's always been great, and I think our educational system will keep it great, but we've got to make it affordable.
Thank you for that perspective. Addie, you mentioned applying to four-year schools and hearing back and worrying about the cost of tuition. I know when I attended community college here, it was common to hear students say, I'm just a community college student. How has Cuesta Promise affected the way you feel about being a student here?
I can relate a little bit to that because before I attended Cuesta, I think I had a similar mindset. When I was in my senior year and I would hear all my friends talking about where they were going to be moving off to, what school they were going to go to, and my plan was to live at home and go to Cuesta, and it just didn't sound as grand as all of their plans. But once I started taking classes, I think by the end of my first semester, I started to realize that I had made the right decision. And a lot of the people that I knew who had gone off to school, the longer they stayed there and the longer I was at Cuesta, more of them started dropping out and coming back home because for lots of reasons, whether they just weren't ready to be living on their own for the first time, or they wanted to change their major, but sometimes at a university level that can be really difficult, or for a lot of them the financial hardship was too much. And meanwhile, I had been at Cuesta, and I started off as a psychology major, but I had taken a variety of classes and really found a passion for business, and so I changed my major and knew that it was something I was happy with and that I would stick with. And I started getting involved in other ways. I took Saturday classes to get a certification, a specialization in customer service, and I found programs like the Student Ambassador program, and all of these things made me realize the opportunities that Cuesta was offering me. And now when I talk about being a Cuesta student to my friends and family and new people, I'm so proud that I'm here, and I feel like I'm at an advantage to a lot of the people that I knew who went off to 4 years. I feel like the education as well as all of the opportunities I've received from Cuesta have just put me in a great position to go on and transfer and given me life skills to help me in the workforce as well.
Yeah, Eddie, thank you for that perspective. You know, I've been in this county a long time. My 5 kids all went to San Luis Obispo High School, and I remember a time, and there's still some of that hanging on. That talking about the pressure at the high school level, especially at the senior year, on where you're going to go to school. You know, to the point where I remember hearing some students making up a college they were going to go to, just so they had something to talk about, you know. And I thought, what a travesty, and what pressure putting on. What if they don't get in? And what if they go and they're really not ready? You know, what kind of a defeat is that? They weren't socially ready, they weren't economically ready, they weren't academically ready for the independent demand on performance. What I've seen happen now, especially not only with the Promise, but also with the dual enrollment program and the launching of what she was talking about, the Get Focused, Stay Focused. Almost every freshman in San Luis County now is taking that college credit course, which is really about developing a 10-year plan. How am I going to make my high school education more meaningful? You know, because what I would hear from my own kids would say, yeah, I'm taking history again, I'm taking math again, and the same old thing, without really seeing any connection to what that course had to something beyond. We have now, right now, we have almost 2,000 local high school students enrolled in a Cuesta College class on their campus during their regular school day. And that's what dual enrollment is. Students are now generating a transcript. The transcript will allow them to get a jump start on college, an opportunity to get a jump start on what a college class is like and what the expectations are. And when they graduate from high school, they can earn up to probably right now 15 to 18 units. They have well on their way to getting a first year done. Those courses are all free. And if they come to Cuesta with that, right now, the first year promise, they've almost got a full 2 years under their belt. I was in the cafeteria one day on a Wednesday. Wednesday is Juan's Killer Burrito Day. And so I always like to go to the cafeteria on Wednesday. And so standing waiting for my burrito, I like to talk to students, and I always ask them, you know, where are you from? You know, how'd you get to Cuesta, et cetera. And I was talking to this one young man, and I said, where are you from? At AG. You know, I said, oh, did you go to AG High School? And he goes, oh, yeah, yeah. And I said, what are your plans? He said, well, I'm a freshman, I'm transferring to San Diego State next year. I said, what do you mean you're transferring? Well, I'm a promise student, number one. He was very proud of that. But at Rio Grande High School, he had taken a combination of our classes, this before we were doing dual enrollment. So he was taking enrichment classes that we were offering to South County, and then he leveraged that with some AP credits. And suddenly, he had finished and finished an associate degree for transfer at the end of 1 year. So with the exception of having to pay for the test for the AP, he had not had to pay for his classes. And he thought that was such a great opportunity for himself. And he was a very bright student. He could have gone anywhere. But this is the change I'm seeing now from the students who have to go to Cuesta because that's the only option I have, to those middle income families are now saying, you know, this is a great investment that we have. We'll start here. And just as we've grown the numbers of students from, you know, over the last few years to over 1,000 local students now, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing more of the high-end kids who's done that as a family economic decision, coupled with the fact that, you know, we're darn good. You know, we do a great job at preparing our students. Even James succeeded, you know. Even Bill succeeded, you know. Cheryl, I know, succeeded, you know. So, but yeah, it's changing the mix. The other question I get is, well, you had 1,000 students, but only 700 of them were the promise students. What happened to, why didn't those other 200 plus students choose to apply for the promise? And there are lots of reasons for that. You know, some are families make a choice. We don't really want to take the money. We can well afford it. We have other families that, because you have to fill out the FAFSA, which is the financial, some don't want to do that. They don't want to divulge their tax information, or you have some families that they're dealing with some marital issues and they don't want to share information. We got all kinds of things. And there's another group of students where that application is still in their backpack somewhere. You know, they just didn't get around to getting it done by the time. So we're still working with the county high schools and the individuals who have the closest contact to don't leave money on the table. You know, take advantage of that. Tascadero High School, for instance, they're probably the premier high school in terms of what they're doing now. They have every senior, number one, fill out a Cuesta College application. And almost all of their students also complete the Promise application. Because they want to make sure their students aren't left hanging at the waning moment when suddenly their application gets turned down, or they find out that they can't afford where they're going, or, you know, life changes all the time. And so they really do a good job. And we're seeing that develop in other schools. I know at Costa Union High School, they're really doing a good job of preparing all the streams for that.
I'd like to add one thing, that I think all high school students aren't ready for college, a four-year college when they start. In my case, probably shouldn't say it, but I pride myself in never taking a textbook home in high school. I graduated, maybe a C+ student, but I got through because I wasn't going to college. The professors here at Cuesta and Community College help students prepare themselves not only for the next institution, but for life. And that's a trait of community colleges that people really don't appreciate. I know for me, they helped me, and I graduated at the top of my class at Cal Poly. That's because of the basic education I got here and the preparation from the professors at this institution that helped me understand why learning was important. It allowed me to do other things. It allowed me to change my life. And so what I see in our community back in Massachusetts, because we still spend most of our time there, hopefully we'll get here one of these days, is that the same thing is true. Over 70% of the students that are in community colleges in Massachusetts are there because they can't get into four-year institutions because they don't have the basic skills. The high schools aren't giving them what they need to be able to get in. So they're fulfilling a need in our community that is deeply needed, because we've got the Harvards, the MITs, the Northeasterns, the Boston Universities, the Boston, these are all premier institutions. But the community colleges are help preparing the way for those students so that they can go on to those universities. I know in my case, it made a difference. And I'll add one more anecdote. When we were going to change the laws in Massachusetts, I remember going to see the Speaker of the House, Speaker DeLeo. And we were talking about having to change the law, and he's sitting there and he's saying, "Bill, I hear you." He says, "What the heck do you know about community colleges that you could advise me on changing the laws?" I said, "Mr. Speaker, I went to a community college and I know the difference it made in my life." That changed the entire meeting. We got everything we wanted, and he is the best proponent of community colleges now in Massachusetts because he can see the power of the difference it can make in someone's life, and that's important.
So I think at this point we'll begin to collect the question cards from folks, do some Q&A with the audience. But before we move to that section, I understand Brittany here graduated from Cuesta through the Cuesta Promise program and has moved on to other heights, and I would like to share a bit about her experience.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Brittany Tierney, as he mentioned, and I'm so honored to be here today to share with you about my experience here at Cuesta and to be a Cuesta Promise Scholarship recipient as well. I had the privilege to be the first Promise Scholarship graduate here at Cuesta, and I'm so excited to share with you that I was able to then transfer to Cal Poly, which is where I'm at currently. I am majoring in experience industry management, concentrating in event planning management, and minoring in agriculture communications. I graduated here in spring of 2015, and after that is when I transferred to Cal Poly. So when I look back on where my life has taken me and how I have come to where I am today, I realized that the main three things that have brought me here, not only my family, my faith, but also my time here at Cuesta. I started Cuesta here when I was 14 as a high school enrichment student. I was homeschooled, and so I was able to spend most of my time here at Cuesta, and through that I came to learn that Cuesta not only is a community college, but much more of a family. During that time at Cuesta, I was able to realize how much they promote diversity, as well as just the feeling of community here. I still remember going into my first class. I was 14, and the lady next to me, she asked me, "How old are you?" And I told her, and she's like, "You know what, I'm 65, and we were sitting here in the same class together." And it was so neat through that experience to see how much Cuesta promotes academics no matter what age you are. I had the opportunity to be at both this campus, but also the campus up in Paso as well. So in 2014 is when I graduated high school. At that point, I had 1 year left here at Cuesta before graduation. And at that point, I realized, okay, how am I going to do this? Because so far I'd been able to attend Cuesta for free because I was a high school enrichment, but then I came to realize I had 1 year left here. However, I needed to figure out how I was going to do this financially. And that is when the Promise Scholarship came about. That's when I realized I can do this. And so I'm super thankful for the Promise Scholarship for allowing me to go through my education and to finish my time off here at Cuesta without having any student debt or anything along those lines. And so the Promise Scholarship allowed me to focus on my academics because I wasn't worried about the stresses of school or of attaining, hang on one second. So the Promise Scholarship allowed me to focus on my academics, and because of that, I wasn't having to stress and worry about where the financials are coming. And so because of that, I was then able to graduate here with no student debt, but also was able to graduate here with the 4.0. And so I was super thankful that I was able to focus my attention on academics because of the gift of the Promise Scholarship. So through that, I was just super thankful, honestly, to be here today, just to share with you my experiences with the Promise Scholarship. And I'm just so thankful for all of you who have worked towards making that a possibility for students. So I'd like to thank Cuesta Promise for creating a solid foundation for me, but also giving me the skills, the resources, and the knowledge to continue to further my success as I go out throughout my future. Thank you.
Some great stories out of Cuesta. We'll move to some Q&A from the audience. Thank you for submitting your questions. The first we have here is, can you talk a little bit about the second year? I don't, maybe it's Cambria or it's the expansion to a second year. Both might be interesting.
Well, you've heard a little bit about what's going on up in Cambria, and that is a cash-in, cash-out program at this point. From the gift that was given to us anonymously, we calculate probably about 3 years that it would pay out. So in order to create that longevity and that assurance that this could be made available for all of our first-year Promise students, we have estimated it's going to take about a $10 million addition into our endowment. About $2 million of that would be to beef up the front end, because we're going to hit the ceiling fairly soon because of our success in attracting local high school students, and that's a good kind of a problem. You know, we want to make sure that we're always being pushed to do more. But that would allow us to build the endowment and make sure that that interest income, investment income is going to adequately take care of the growing number of first-year students. The second year will have a little bit different spin on it. The first year is all about access. You know, we're a come-as-you-are college. And just as Brittany said, you know, we don't care how old you are, the shape you're in, what religion you are, what it is. You know, this is your place. This is your college. And we want it to be available to anyone who aspires to change their life. The second year is a different deal. The second year, we want to make sure students can demonstrate that they've taken advantage of the opportunity and they've performed academically. So now what we're looking at is, there is a requirement for the Board of Governors fee waiver students. In order to keep the Board of Governors fee waiver from first year to second year, you have to demonstrate some academic performance. And they're not overwhelmingly challenging, but you have to complete at least, Patrick can correct me, at least 50% of your units and with a 2.0 or better. Is that right, Patrick? Pretty close?
More than 50%.
More than 50%, okay. So we would probably adopt that standard for the second year students, because we don't want to have students play the game between Promise and Bog, and say, well, if I don't do this, then I'll take the other one. So that way it would be consistent for all students who come in under the Promise. And so that would be the criteria that we'd be using about eligibility for the second year. And then, of course, you know, we would need enough of, in addition to the endowment, which we estimate that $8 million would be adequately take care of that second year. So we have the viewpoint that Bill and I shared, and it came in the Tribune on Sunday. That was the first public acknowledgement about the second year and what kind of a dollar figure that we're looking at. We have been talking to some interested donors who are very interested in contributing to this at the $1 million level. So we know that there are people that want to drink the Kool-Aid just as much as we do. And so that's what we're going to be doing now, is continuing to reach out and tell the story and look at the cost benefit of this being a lifetime investment rather than just spend $8 million and it's gone. You know, so for a donor aspect, this is one of the greatest opportunities to change the lives of the greatest number of people, is to create an endowment and let the earnings of that go on in perpetuity. So that's our game plan at this point.
Great. And maybe in that vein, how much are you all looking to raise to endow the second year, and how will you go about raising that money? You touched on some of that.
Well, we're going to send you a pledge card, James.
I'm happy
You're going
to.
to put your money where your mouth is, you know, so. Yeah, no, it's, you know, there, in these kinds of campaigns, there's usually a silent portion of the campaign where we're working with specific donors that we've come into contact with, and we want to encourage to invest in this program. And then once we get to a certain portion of that, 50 to 75% of the way, then we do a more public launch, because then we're looking for, and we've already started, even then, we've already started to get donations into the endowment. Anywhere from $100 to, what was the latest, 50,000 added to the endowment. So we know that there's interest out there at all levels. And as equally as important as the final dollar amount is just that emotional commitment about wanting to help that next generation of students who hopefully will have an opportunity that maybe a donor didn't have, or that they'd like to see other people have. We know it's out there.
Please send a request. I can't promise a six-figure donation, but be happy to chip in.
6 figures just depends on where the decimal point is.
That's the math teacher, right?
That's right, yeah.
Bill here, based on your experience in Boston, how much of an economic impact can a Promise program have on a local community?
I don't know how to adequately judge that. I mean, it could be huge. I mean, personally, I know what Cuesta did for me. Can you put a dollar amount on something like that? I mean, I like to think of all the work I've done in education, what our companies have done, and so forth. I think the way I would answer the question, it's unboundless. That you have to create that spark that goes and does something. I mean, for us as a family, it's no secret we gave $10 million to endow the golf program for first-time attending students to a university, to engineers, to Cuesta College graduates. And so we hope that other students can experience what we've experienced in that regard. I hope someday Cuesta gets a golf program, because I'd like to do something there. Hint, hint. But those are the things. I mean, as a donor, you want to do things that excite you, that in a way you can give back and allow others to achieve something. And so this program, the fact that it's being known now, I think it will take off. I look at $8 million. It's a big number, but it's not that hard to raise for something this important, because, as Gil pointed out, it does change lives. And that's unmeasurable, in my opinion.
Right. Here we have the question we're all dying to know. What does Addie's future look like? What are your next steps?
Well, I'm currently anxiously awaiting to receive my acceptance letters from schools I will be graduating in May, and I will be going somewhere in the fall. My top choice is Cal Poly. I'm also looking at San Diego State University. Those are schools that I'm very excited about, and schools that I wouldn't have been able to get into straight out of high school. And I feel like Cuesta has just prepared me so much for a university setting. I'm confident that I will be able to transition and be successful. So, yeah.
All right. Well, good luck with those letters coming back. Here we have a question about Cuesta Promise, some of the specifics. Is it available to GED students?
Yes.
Great. And CHSPE students?
Yes.
All right. There we go. The next question we have here is the political atmosphere perhaps affecting families' willingness to fill out federal forms? Is that a concern here at Cuesta?
Well, we've been having some conversation about that. For certain segments of our student population, I'd say yes, especially our 540 students who are the children of immigrant families who came here with immigrant parents. There's, I'd say that from what we've been talking about, what we've been hearing, students, and I've heard this with the county superintendents also, the concern of many of the students, both in the K-12 and with the college students, is not so much on their status necessarily, but it's on their family status. Who's really concerned about, I heard one story where a fourth grader was expressing concern and was fearful that they were going to go home and their parents were going to be gone. You know, about somebody going to swoop up and being deported. So I'm very pleased and proud of the stance that all of the public universities in California are taking at CSU, UC, and community college about that we are going to do everything we can to protect the status of our students here within our public institutions. And you'll see more and more public statements, resolutions, issuances from the Board of Regents or the Board of Trustees, from the CSU, and from we heard it from the Chancellor's Office for the community colleges, and individual boards of the 73 districts in California, community college districts, are also launching very, very public statements about protecting the integrity of the information we hold on all of our students.
James, I'd like to add that what we're trying to do is change the law in Massachusetts that if someone completes their college degree, 540 student, that we give them citizenship, that they demonstrated a commitment to do things right. The other thing, people may not realize it, but a person getting a college degree is 5 times less of ever having involved in a crime. So there's proof that higher education does make you a better citizen. And so those of us in business feel that we can get students to go through that. There should be a reward at the end. It's tough sledding. I wish I could say it was a given, but there's a lot of us that are putting our shoulder to the wheel that we think this is something we should do. I mean, we've educated them here. We should be able to keep them here because they want to be here.
Yeah, that's a great goal. Our next question here, how much of a benefit is it to have a Promise program endowed as opposed to pay as you go? You talked a bit about that, Dr. Stork. What is it that makes you feel the endowment's the way to go?
Well, you know, I'm always fundraising, but I don't want to be always fundraising at the level it takes in order to sustain this. You know, this is the pay-as-you-go is fine, but it is a draining pressure that if you don't deliver, you're going to leave either current students hanging or the next wave of students coming are going to be on the edge about whether or not there's going to be funding there the next year or not. We don't want to do that. We want a promise is a promise. And I want the Cuesta Promise to be real, I want it to be secure, and I want it to be there for every student who takes the opportunity to do so. So the endowment, and of course there's some risk in endowments because of the stock market, you know, it ebbs and flows. But we've done very, very well in our investment strategies with the foundation, so we're very, very confident that we can manage the endowment in such a way that we will not feel that pinch at that particular time. But you need to continue to grow the endowment because you have to envision the fact that you're always going to be continually successful. And that is, you're going to give more students the opportunity every year. You know, right now, the number of seniors graduating from local high schools in our county is pretty flat right now. It's running around 2,800 students every year, and that's been this way for the last 5 years, and it looks like for another 5 years we're going to see it fairly flat. So if we're going to grow, and we're going to grow our freshman population, then we need to get a higher percentage of those students every year. The Promise is a wonderful opportunity to encourage and give that hope, like Addie said and then Brittany said, you know, that this is a place for them and that it takes a lot of pressure off of them to be successful. So the endowment is the only way I feel is really the most successful way.
Great. We have someone in the audience who works at one of the local nonprofits. They'd like to know what advice the panel has for the nonprofit community here in San Luis Obispo that would like to accomplish their own goals while also supporting the Cuesta Promise. So how might nonprofits be supportive of the college, of public education? Here in
I have a
San
suggestion. One of the areas that we're working on with our arts multimedia entertainment pathway is, first of all, our students earn Adobe certification, but they're also doing a lot of work in branding, and we have started to partner with nonprofit organizations in doing branding competitions. Most recently is with Cal Poly's Hot House. But some of the ways that students are developing by doing branding activities is really developing entrepreneurial thinking, and they're developing problem-solving skills, communication skills. We know that a lot of our students from the current high school population are going to face possibly up to 14 careers in their lives. There's a lot of flexibility and fluency of thinking that you need as a student who's equipped. Here are just some of the questions that our students had to answer in this branding. Things like, what's the unique story behind your business? And that could either be your business of a product you're creating or even yourself, branding yourself as what's the big problem that your brand solves? What sources did you use for your resources? Things like how do users care about your product or service? And what we have done at our high school recently is all of our students could compete with people on a panel from the nonprofit and local business industry partners would then judge, and of those students, the top 10 went to the Hot House, and then from those top 10, it narrowed down to the top 3. We would love to have a county-wide competition across high schools and to really kind of develop this opportunity. So it'd be great maybe with Cuesta College if we could partner in some way like that. And I think to what Addie said about what is the allure of Cuesta College? Oh, you're just going to Cuesta. I think the more that we can build these exciting opportunities, the more students can locate themselves on this campus and feel excited about coming here.
Thank you. I have one last question here for today's panel. The College Promise movement, as I said at the outset, is picking up all over the country. I mentioned that there are now over 200 of these, or close to 200 of these programs in 40 states, all of them a bit different from each other. New York, Rhode Island, Arkansas, and Hawaii have recently joined the growing list of states looking into statewide programs. Palomar and Barstow are just two communities, only two communities here in California looking to come online soon as well. Cuesta, I love the credit that campuses give each other. Cuesta having been inspired by Ventura, Santa Barbara, I was just with them, and they were talking about how inspired they had been by the work here at Cuesta. So a lot of credit to go around. But as other communities consider building these programs, making community college debt-free, what advice would you all have for those communities, either from the school district perspective, or as a student, or from the business perspective, or administrative?
Well, the first thing is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to float an idea, because it's not going to happen unless somebody takes the responsibility to look at all the cost benefits it has to as really an investment. And we just we fell into this as out of the good fortune of somebody who wrote Cuesta College into their estate. I think it is, I call it divine intervention, but it did allow us to match up an idea and a desire with the reality of being able to deliver it. And if the DeVica family hadn't written that gift into their estate plan, we would have found another way to do it. It may have taken us longer, and we may have started with a pay-as-you-go, but whatever it takes is the right thing to do. And the more people that get on the bandwagon, and the more people see the benefits of it, the Addies, the Brittany's, the countless other students we have over 2,000 students who have received the Promise Scholarship today. To see what that is doing for students and for families is reason enough to want to invest in the future of our county, and which then accomplishes the items that Bill was so readily talking about, and that is the access to education, continually providing an educated workforce for whatever discipline or whatever career path one takes. But it takes somebody kicking that off. And if I hadn't gone to Ventura, I probably wouldn't have heard much about it. But once we heard about that, and then Shannon came on board, we talked to Long Beach, we talked to Santa Rosa Junior College, because each of them had, those are the three that were the most prominent that we knew of in California, and they were all different. And so we picked the brains of people that started those programs, how they implemented them, what was the ongoing mechanism to continue to fund those, what was the success rate of the impact that students were showing, what was the going to college rate difference in their particular districts. That was enough for us to say, this is really the direction we need to move. And we won't stop until we achieve that second year.
I think, James, the programs are getting better known. The communication, the visibility is really key to College Promise. If you think of where we were a few years ago, it wasn't at 200 programs. And I think people will continue to give, but they also need to get. And Undersecretary Martha Cantor is involved. I've opened my Rolodex and lined her up with 6 CEOs to go talk to that I think are education-minded, and we'll continue to open the aperture. And as the word gets out there, this makes such sense that I think it'll continue to grow as we go forward.
I'd like to build too on what Dr. Stork said. Around 2014, when we had the beginning of the Cuesta Promise, there was a wonderful session where all of the high schools were invited to a day-long session that you held here at Cuesta. And at that session, we had counselors, teachers, administrators, and we went to breakout sessions. And I was able to hear in one of those sessions about Ventura. And I think, taking the next step beyond just the idea, but really reaching out to your secondary schools and explaining what this looks like, so that it's, again, not such a big step for us to enter into the process, was also really helpful.
I would just say that, and it's so easy for me to see the impact that the Cuesta Promise or a Promise program can provide, because it's so personal to me and my family. But to think about that growing across, more districts and states and across the nation, that's really inspiring, because I think that the people who are willing to put in the work at community college are going to be the innovative and productive members of their community, and that I just feel really grateful that there are individuals who are willing to invest in the future of young people.
Thank you. Thanks to our panel. Would any of you like to, is there anything else you'd like to share, Dr.?
I'm just looking forward to being in the audience when Britton and Addie are back talking about what they've done.
Yeah.
Well, great. Is there anything you'd like to leave us with, Dr. Stork?
Well, just first of all, thank you, James, for coming back to Cuesta College.
And the 6 figures that he's going to...
That's right. I think it's 12 plus 12 plus 12. But, you know, and to see your passion and your commitment to join up on the Heads Up campaign is really inspiring for me to see how much you've invested your professional interest in this. And for Bill, I can't ever say enough about Bill because he's been such a champion of community colleges and of Cuesta College in terms of his ability to articulate clearly the difference it does make and what potential is unleashed, you know, with a good beginning, and people like the counselor who's talking about it planted seeds in his mind that were not listed on a scorecard somewhere. That gave him an opportunity to really find a career path that has turned into something really special. And for having the smarts of marrying Cheryl, who was a better student and probably never lets him ever forget that. And you know, I work with all the county superintendents in the district, and we meet monthly through Jim Brescia. And Vicky's come on board in the last 3 years, and it's just really saw the light in terms of what we can do together. You know, offering those engineering classes at Coast Union High School is huge. You know, those students are getting the opportunity for something that very, very few high school students in our district, you know, have been able to do. And then to work with people like the Crockers and others in Cambria to really look beyond the first-year program and look at how, starting in your neighborhood, you can create the opportunity for Coast Union High School graduates. So it is percolating. I think our mission now is really to work hard at the middle school age children and families to start planting the seed about, because that's where they start talking about high school and beyond, and that question starts to come up that Addie so eloquently, you know, identified, and how are we going to pay for it? You know, and having the promise and the dual enrollment options as they work their way through high school and prepare for college takes the burden, some of the burden off of that question. So if I can, as a family, say I'm going to provide 4 years of education for my family or for my student, but if I can do 2 years and maybe some more for graduate school, you know, what a great opportunity for family to have those kind of choices that they can make in terms of the planning. So I don't have any pajamas that says promise on them, but that's the way I feel. I feel like it's a daily and lifelong commitment to better the lives of students in our county. You know, the community colleges, our faculty and our staff have probably one of the most difficult challenges in the world, and that is to have an open access institution where we take people of all backgrounds, all levels of accomplishment, no cookie cutter they have to come through, no SAT scores, no certain high school GPA. It's a tremendous challenge, but there's no greater opportunity to change a life than in a California community college and beyond. But so we are all engaged in a mission that focuses on the bettering our local community and residents of our local community. And I wouldn't have spent 50 years doing this if I didn't really feel that this is you know, unique to the United States of America, and that is the community college system. And I think California is its own microcosm of the community college experience because of the commitment to access. So James, again, thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this day.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel for your commitment to a campus and community we all love, and thanks to all of you for your support as well.